everyone, welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. Today I'm excited to talk about a brand new reissue by a brand new label, and that is Pepper Adams Quintet by Gammaut Recordings. I'm joined here by the founder of Gammaut, Philipe Berman, and together we're going to discuss how this release came about, as I actually joined Gammaut as a producer about maybe halfway through the process of putting this out. But before I do, I want to just run down some of the nuts and bolts of this release to sort of set the context. So again, the title is Pepper Adams Quintet. This was originally put out by Mode Records in 1957. This particular release, we're presenting it in stereo. It's in 45 RPM format on 180 gram vinyl. It was cut by Bernie Grundman from a 15 IPS Dolby flat copy. Comes in a Stoughton gatefold jacket with 40-page tipped-in booklet, which features essays, new artwork, session photos. And it's available at gammaut.com for $50, which does include US domestic shipping, but we're actually shipping internationally as well. So the official release date for this was last Friday, October 24th. So this is indeed available and it's shipping right now. So Philipe, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. It's an honor to be here in your channel. I've been watching your channel, as you know, for years now, and never thought I'll be here, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, and here we are working on the same project, so it's exciting. So let me ask you, why did you decide to start this label, Gammaut Recordings, in the first place?
I am a record collector first and foremost. I've been collecting records for many years. I never thought I would own and start a record label, and that idea came to me about 5 years ago when I realized that when it comes to the reissues market, there is a tendency of the existing players, the existing reissue labels, to always focus on the same artists, on the same original labels, always on the same stuff, right? I think that there is a lack uh, of diversity in terms of releases, and a lot of the music that I like and a lot of the music that I collect are not that popular. You know, there are a lot of records out there that deserve a hi-fi, good sounding treatment, but there it's too risky for people to do it, right? So I decided just to take a chance and put the matters into my own hands and try and start talking to people to see what should I do, what can I do to bring some of the records I like to the reissues market. And that's how I started. It's just by realizing that there was an opportunity there. And as a collector, I'll never get fully satisfied with the state, given the state of the reissues market at that time.
So to that point, when you began sort of going through this process, right? Did you know what releases you would even have the ability to put out, or was that sort of a discovery process that happened after you started looking?
Good question. So I made a list. I made a list of dozens of records that I thought deserved a hi-fi treatment, a high quality treatment, right? And what I did, I just went one by one in no particular order, and I started researching about who owns the rights, who do I have to talk to be able to work on these records. And to be honest, when I made a list, I had no idea even what master rights were, how any of that thing worked, the legal aspect, the contracts. I have to learn everything by myself. So it's a lot of research. Was a lot of research, a lot of taking the phone and old school way, calling people. Can you help me? I'm Philippe. By the way, I'm trying to put this label together. A lot of no's, as you can imagine. Who the hell is this guy calling me and asking for help? But just trying and calling people and doing research. I learned a lot about what I needed to do. Uh, so, and it was learning by doing, right? I just had my list, start emailing people, calling people, learning throughout the way. It was only after more than a year and a half almost, that I got my first yes. I was able to find someone uh, who gave me a chance, who took a risk with me. I had no tracking record, never worked in the music business, in the record business. I'm just a record collector, and up to that point, it was just a lot of try and error. But to your original question, I had a list, and it just ended up that Pepper Adams was the first on that list that someone gave me a chance to work with.
Yeah, so to that point, I mean, this ends up being the first release, right? Like, so Pepper Adams Quintet. So what was the process, I guess, like for this specific release in terms of, working with whoever it is that owns the rights and for tracking down, I guess, the master tapes for this release?
So it's it's a lot of detective work. I'm gonna use the example of Pepper Adams Quintet. So this album was recorded by Mold back in the day. It's a very turbulent story, which is in the booklet that we put together. I'm not going to go over it because people should read it. It's a very good essay by Ken Poston. But uh, that it's chasing leads day after day. Is doing research, and then you find a name here. Oh, in the 70s, this record dealer wrote an article in whatever newspaper in the countryside of Michigan about the fact that VSOP was buying the rights from Mode, and then you have a name there. Who owned VSOP? And then you start googling and looking for that person's email or that person's phone number, which in this case is Peter Jacobson and Jeff Barr. They are the founders of VSOP Records, who bought the catalog in the late 70s, early 80s. So it's just it's a lot of detective work and calling people, and sometimes you find someone who knows them, but they're not willing to give the contact info. It's just a lot of convincing and trying to demonstrate that you're serious about it. But for every yes that I got, it's probably 50 no's. Just people just turning you down, and nothing personal. Again, I just put myself in those people's shoes. Here comes a guy who clearly doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't even speak the lingo of the music business, right? And he's asking for context. He's asking for leads. Why would I help him, right? So maybe that's why it took me almost 1 year and a half to get my first lead and my first opportunity to talk to Peter Jacobson from VSOP.
So, yeah, certainly the path of least resistance is probably a no, right? So, so for this specific release, obviously, Gamut's putting it out in stereo, and I know a lot of people care deeply, right, about the source material, and I'm just kind of curious if you could speak to maybe just a couple of things. So, one is the availability or lack thereof of that mono tape because this was originally put out in mono. So why stereo? And maybe the other piece of this is the role of Bernie Grundman in kind of the process.
100%. So in terms of the source material, when I started the label, one of the philosophies I wanted to implement is that we're gonna go for the best possible sound, uh, and of course that means that we have to use the best available source. First question is the original master tapes available? And that was probably the first question I made to Peter. And he said, we have the stereo tapes. We don't have the mono ones. The mono ones were lost in the early 60s when Mode went into bankruptcy. Okay, and it was bought by Bob Sherman, if I'm not mistaken. He's the one that put the interlude reissues in the early 60s. Okay, someone made a mistake doing those remastering sessions, and they dubbed the monotape. So the monotape was gone. Okay, and they did not make any safeties of the monotapes, and everything that we had was the stereotapes. Okay, but we learned very quickly that the stereotapes were not in a condition that we could be used. The probability that by running those tapes through the machine they will be lost forever was too high for us to even try that. So the question became, what is the next best source we have available? And we found out that there was a flat copy of the stereotapes that was made almost 50 years ago. Is Adobe a flat copy of the stereotapes, and that's the tape that has been used for years and years to with any of the reissues we have from that release. So you have a Japanese reissue, I think from the early 90s, that used that tape. It's interesting because that reissue is mono, okay, and the only thing available is stereo. So I think the logical conclusion is that the reissue is a fold down of the stereo tape. And the SOP reissue from the 80s also used that tape. It's also a mono reissue. So again, probably a fold down. So although the stereotypes exist, the copy of the stereotypes exists in good shape. All the reissues we had since Interlude were mono. So there's also, realize an opportunity for us to release this in stereo for the first time in almost 70 years.
Yeah, so this is one of those kind of interesting examples where, it sounds like Mode is similar to what Rudy Van Gelder was doing with Blue Note, in that for a period of time he was recording in mono and in stereo. And so in this example, Bones Howe was the original engineer, and it's kind of interesting to see some of these engineers decide that simultaneously they're going to be recording in mono and stereo, but then there's only plans to release it in mono. And obviously, Mode was around for a year, if that, right? So it's possible they could have taken the Blue Note approach and start with mono, wait a little bit, and release it in stereo, just as how they did with Blue Train, right? With
Mm-hmm.
John Coltrane
Yep.
Blue Train for Blue Note. So it's interesting. It's just kind of interesting though that they would have both. That only one was used,
I,
and then cut to now we sort of have this opportunity to release it, not necessarily for the first time, but for the first time in a while.
it's a good question, and I can only theorize on this, but I think that stereo was a very very early technology in 1957, early 50s, right? The first stereo record that came into the market, a commercial release, came after the Pepper Adams Quintet was released. So it was a very new technology, and I imagine that it was very risky. If you put yourself in those guys' position, it's a new technology, it's a new product. Most people don't know what stereo is, so it was probably very risky from a marketability perspective just to do stereo at the time. Uh, I'll say that though, I think that they had very good vision and maybe understanding that stereo would become something, and they recorded in both mono and stereo. But my theory is that the decision to go with mono was more due to the novelty of stereo recordings, to the risks involved, and also because not every single record player, I can imagine that most of the record players at people's homes will not play stereo at that time. So I think it's more of an economic uh, uh, decision at that time.
So with this particular release, and again with Bernie Grundman's involvement, I mean, first of all, let me just ask you, Bernie Grundman getting involved for the very first release for Gammaut Recordings, like just that in and of itself is a little bit of like a, hey, like, wait, how did this happen?
I know, and I cannot believe it myself. I remember when I told my wife, "Hey, I called Bernie. I talked to Bernie Grundman, and it's happening." He agreed to take on the project. I explained to him what I was trying to do. I was very honest with Bernie. Bernie, I have no idea exactly about what I'm doing. I'm taking this as an opportunity to learn, and I'm learning from a lot of people. I hope to learn from you. He was very open. We talk a lot over the phone, especially during the mastery session. We discussed a lot the pros and cons of some decisions we were making, and he was very, very patient with me. And I like to say going forward that Bernie is like a mentor, because a lot of what I learned was during uh, this project. Before the mastering session, I had so many questions, and he took the phone. He would call me back. We will discuss, but also during the mastering session, just having him work on a project that I was responsible for was unbelievable, and he did an amazing job. I was listening to the record again for I don't know how many times I listened to this record already, and I'm always awed when I compare it to the original pressing, to the VSOP pressing, to the Japanese pressing. It just did an amazing job with the record.
Yeah, this one really, the music really jumps out, and I think that part of it is Bernie and his process and the equipment that he uses, and obviously his expertise. I think part of it is that, I'd never heard this in stereo, um, or maybe to the extent that I had, it would have been like a stream or something, and who knows what process somebody used to put that on the internet. So that was part of it too. But I have to say that Mode Records was not exactly the pinnacle of quality, at least in terms of certainly recording and getting Bones Howe involved. Obviously, that was high quality, but the vinyl media that they used, my in my experience with Mode Records, like more than half of them were on what I typically refer to as recycled vinyl or just a lower quality vinyl. Yeah, that causes this kind of light noise floor. And again, it's weird because not all of them are like that. I came across a copy of the Harry Babison or Harry Babison Mode Records release just the other day in a local store, and I was looking in the runout to see if it was that kind of textured thing that made me think, oh, there's going to be a noise floor, and there wasn't. But every copy of Pepper Adams that I've found has it, and so this is kind of one of those interesting opportunities, almost right, to do the music justice, perhaps, and make it sound as good as it possibly could, given the sources available.
And you're spot on. I think that what happened back in the day, they only pressed so many albums originally in 1957, and 6 months later they went into bankruptcy, right? And what happened is that the pressing plant they were using uh, took over. There was a law at that time that allowed pressing plants to press the albums to recover any debt that the label had with them. But what they did, they pressed in a low quality vinyl and sold those records very very cheaply. They just wanted to recoup their investments, okay, their debt. So I think there are two types of pressings that happened in 57 and 58. The original ones from Mode, and I don't know how many they did. I think it's only a few. The vinyl quality is better, okay, and maybe that's what you heard in the other album you just mentioned. But in 58, when the pressing plant just decided to press more and more to recoup their investments, they use a much lower quality vinyl, and that just flooded the market. That's the majority of what you're going to find from Mode original pressings. So that's probably what's happening. And you're right. The 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 Gammaut release we're putting out, the vinyl, the pressing from Gotta Groove, on top of Bernie's mastering, just makes it shine, right? It makes the whole music shine. It's another experience, and I compare this to every single reissue of this album. I bought every single one of them to compare, and it's just a completely different experience. So I'm very happy with the results.
So speaking of comparison, and I don't want to ask you necessarily to rehash everything that's in the booklet, right? So for those out there, Philippe put together his own essay that actually discusses kind of some of the decision making and some of the process for putting this out. But one of the questions I know that that we are getting right as this comes out is, this is in 45 RPM and it's a single disc. So what gives? And I'll kind of I'll address part of that, but then I want to turn it over to you. I mean, the way that it is able to happen is because this album is about 30 and a half minutes long, and 30 and a half minutes long can fit on a single disc. Bernie was comfortable doing so, and there's no degradation. I know that there's this idea that, oh, if the grooves are closer together, that there could be a problem. But with 30 and a half minutes, it fits comfortably on a single disc, even though it was originally put out in 33, right? So it's a single disc, it's in 45, and the way that that happens is because it's relatively shorter. But the funny thing is that I actually looked into this. I even looked into the Blue Note sessions. So many of these old original sessions were albums were between 30 and 35 minutes, maybe 36, maybe 37. They're all in that spot. It's just that they were, regardless of how short they were put out in 33, because the LP format, the 12-inch LP format, was really only associated with 33 RPM at the time. So that's kind of an interesting nuance. But what I wanted to ask you is, I understand that Bernie cut this in both 45 and 33. So not only did we make the decision to put it out in 45, but we had the benefit of hearing it in both, right?
Exactly. So I took this opportunity as a record collector, first and foremost. I always had the curiosity of understanding the differences between 33 and 45. And you can really only do that if you're able to isolate every other factor, right? Pressing plant, mastering, you name it. There's so many factors that comes into play when you're producing vinyl, and the speed at which you cut is only one of them. So by doing this project, I saw an opportunity to satiate my own curiosity. Would How different would it sound, the same record cut at 33 versus 45? And I decided to do that. I talked to Bernie. Bernie, can you cut at both speeds. And he said, yes, let's do that. It's going to be a good experiment. Uh, and he said right away, 45 is going to sound better. Okay, okay, but that's what everybody tells me. But I want to hear with my own ears how much better. What is the difference? Why am I listening the 33 uh, uh, versus the 45? Right. So the first thing he did, he sent me two acetates. Right. He cut me an acetate in 33 and one in 45, and I'll show you. I'll show it to you. I have it here. So this is the acetate that Bernie cut me 33. This is 45. Right. So he sent me this before he even cut the lacquers. And but this is a flat copy of the tape. There is no mastering. He just ran the tape and cut at two different speeds, right? And you can hear the difference. And I said, okay, Bernie, I'm gonna pay you to do two different masterings. Well, the same mastering, but I'm gonna pay you to do two different cuttings, right? 45 and 33. I'm gonna press those and I'm gonna listen to them and I'm gonna choose which one we're gonna release, right? So he did that. He mastered. He cut above 33 and 45. We got the lacquers pressed. I got a groove. I got the test pressings, and then the moment of truth came. Right? Okay, I can hear some differences in the acetates that have no masterings, but when Bernie does his magic, how much better the 45 or worse would be. And I'll tell you this, it's different. Okay, it's the 33 sounds very, very good. I'll have no problem in releasing this record in 33. Okay, but it just sounds different. Uh, the way I like to describe is that the 45 is closer to what you can hear from the tape. It's fuller, it's less bright, uh, but not that much. There's the sound is so hard to describe with words, but the words I like to say, it's fuller, it's a little bit warmer and less bright. Okay, so I prefer the 45, and I wanted other people that I trust to listen to those two versions, and I believe that that was not the first time I contacted you. We were already talking about the project at the time, but I sent you both, and I asked you to take a listen as well. I sent to other friends and other people I trust to take a listen, and everybody says 45. 45 sounds better. People describe in different ways why, uh, but it was unanimously agreed that the 45 sounded better. But again, I don't want this to be something that people take away. Oh, 33s sound bad. No, not at all. The difference actually is much smaller than what I was expecting. As a fan of and as a collector of 45s, audiophile recordings, I have a lot. Music Matters, Analog Productions. I was expecting the gap to be much wider, and it's not, which I think is good news for record collectors, 33 or 45, right? But it was just an interesting opportunity for me to do this experiment and satiate my own curiosity.
Yeah, yeah, and and again, with it being able to fit on a single disc, I mean, it's not even it doesn't become a cost, irrespective of your desire to press to have Bernie do both. In terms of the actual end price or the end cost of this item, it actually doesn't impact it because you can do a single disc in 33, you can do a single disc in 45. So, one of the things that occurred to me, and just kind of speaking about the sound maybe just a little bit, which again is always hard to do, but at this point, I've listened to this record on a setup that I know very well, which is mine right here. However, as you know, I recently DJ'd at a local bar here in Atlanta called Commune, which is a very it's sort of like a one of those jazz kisa sort of listening bar style places that's here in Atlanta, and I spun some tracks from it and I listened to it in that context. I was just recently at Hi-Fi Buys in Atlanta, which is an audiophile shop, playing it on a very nice system. And the thing that occurred to me is that and this is going to sound obvious, but like every setup has its own signature, and brings out maybe different qualities or makes me think in a different way about this release. But I think what's encouraging is that it's consistent. So in the same way, when you asked folks to evaluate the test pressing, consistently 45 RPM sounded like it was the way to go, which is very important because this exact reason. All everybody's setup sounds different. Not everybody spends, you know, $500,000 all the way down to a, call it a $200 setup. You want to have something that's going to sound great for everyone. And okay, my setup is a little bit more than $200, but it's certainly nothing like, some of these very expensive ones. And would say though that regardless, it's a great sounding release. Um, and I think it really does the musicians justice. So I kind of wanted to pivot to maybe the other side of this release beyond maybe just the vinyl, and that's the cover, right? The gatefold. So it's clear that the physical product was something important to your vision for this release, right? So I know I led up front, Stoughton, which if not the best in the business, at least among the best in the business, right? uh, Gatefold jacket, but more than that, it's a heavy gatefold jacket, and the booklet is extensive. Did you start out thinking that this was the way that you wanted to go with this release, or did you arrive to it after sort of amassing some of the content that was available?
That's a very good question. When I decided to embark on this journey and create, start a label, I had a vision for the label, not only for this release, but for the label. And that vision basically reflects what I like as a record collector, right? So, what I mean by that is that number one, you need to have the music, the music that we like as jazz fans, as music lovers in general. Um, but also, to me, the vinyl listening experience is extremely is enhanced when you have materials that help you understand the context of the music, the the history, the biography of the artists, of the label, right? I think that we all grow as music appreciators when we have that information helping us elevate the listening experience. So I knew that with the releases coming out of the label of Gammaut, uh, I wanted to have a booklet, and not only like a four-page booklet. I always thought of almost about a book. My original idea was to have a record and a book inside a box. Okay, which I'll tell you right now, 4 years later, it would be a bad idea for many reasons. But that was my original idea. I wanted a book, and inside the book, I wanted the jacket and sorry, a box, and inside the box, a jacket and a book, right? And as I continue to develop that idea, I realized that I'll have to charge too much money for that. The costs, will increase tremendously. And you helped me think through that. Once I invited you to join me in Gamma, you were one of the key people that helped me think through how we can do how could I implement my vision, right? And by thinking about possibilities, I thought about this idea. I don't even know how I came up with this idea, but what if the jacket was a book itself, right? That's what I had in mind. What if we could have a gatefold jacket that also worked as a book, right? And in order to do that, well, we need a thick cardboard, a strong a jacket that can hold the paper and the weight that comes with it, right? So that's how we came up with the with the final product that we have. It is kind of heavy, but I think it's a very good thing. I love this kind of product. It just invites you to open it, to read it, to see what's in here. It's appealing aesthetically, uh, and everything was very, very well thought. Everything that we have here was well thought, from the articles even to the paper. Like, if you see, the paper is not glossy, right? It's actually a special kind of finishing that we have for this release, and probably for all of our releases coming going forward, that it minimizes the probability of scratching. So you can open this and you can read this booklet as many times as you want, and you're not going to have your fingerprints here. You're not going to scratch this, right? So it was everything was thought so we could have a jacket that also served as the book, right? And that's how we ended up here. So going back to my point on the philosophy of the label. So music number one, you know, uh, music lover, a record label for the music lover. Number two is the informational content of that we can bring here. Talked about the artist, the music, why is this important, etc. Production notes. So a record label for the curious mind. Okay, and number three, the audio component that we already talked a little bit about this, and a record label for the hi-fi enthusiast. And that's our philosophy, right? We are a record label for the music lover, curious mind, hi-fi enthusiast. So I think that depicts what we want to do and what we want to bring to the reissues market with our releases.
Yeah, and that's probably what makes it a great overlap with myself, honestly, and my
And that's
you know
why I
interest
invited
not
you to join me, and we can talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, what's funny about this is that, the sort of the thesis behind this channel, at least, and me, making videos every week or so and talking, is because I often go down these research rabbit holes because I'm interested in learning about the very music that I'm listening to in this room. And and what's interesting, I think, through the process of meeting folks on YouTube and producing content, is you actually find that there's other folks with that are similarly minded, right? That access content like this in order to learn more. And so, in a way, that these this initial project and those going forward, in a way, is kind of curating some of that material. And I think what's great about it too is that it isn't just taking material that previously existed, it's new perspectives as well, right? So we could compile the downbeat review of Pepper Adams Quintet, and maybe some old article of him touring. But I think what's really cool about this release is getting Pepper Adams biographer involved in drafting an essay. It's asking new writers to write new content, reflecting on some of these musicians' histories. I mean, even down to the point of getting commissioning essentially new artwork, right? So we not only have session photos, we have new artwork that was produced just for this release. And I think it's nice to be able to preserve the legacy and then honor it with this kind of renewed interest and renewed attention to bring it to
A
fans and
hundred
audience.
percent. It is also a possibility for us to honor the people that work to maintain the hobby we all have, from master engineers to pressing plants to writers that dedicate their life to researching musicians and the music, So the fact that we can hire Gary Carner, Steve Serra, Ken Poston, and commission essays from them, I think that it's something that I feel very proud about. These are the people. There are many others, of course. There's only one release, but it's a way of honoring and paying back in a way the people that allows us to listen to music and enjoy what we love so much on a day-to-day basis.
So one of the questions that I know that we've already been hearing is this the beginning of a mode reissue series? And if not, what's next? And obviously, I know I'm well aware that we're not in a position just yet to announce what the second release is, but I'm curious if you can maybe just kind
Yeah,
of comment on that, as well as maybe you know when might folks hear about the
yeah,
next
no, hundred
release?
percent. So I would love to issue everything mode. Uh, the reality is most of the tapes are lost, and that might come as news to a lot of people. But uh, during the turbulent time, the turbulent history of mode, different people and different companies bought the label. It went bankrupt. A lot of the tapes were lost. The question is, what are the sources of material that are out there, and are they good enough for us to produce good sounding records? There are a few tapes left, and I plan to do some more mode sessions. Okay, but it's not only going to be about mode. Our next release is not mode. It's from another smaller label, uh, but it's not mode, right? And we continue, me and you, Chris, to reaching out to other labels, trying to get trying to convince them that they should license records to us. There's so many things we want to do, but the easy answer, or the answer to your original question is, this is not the beginning of a reissue of the whole mode catalog. We're still gonna reissue more mode records, I hope, but it's gonna be more than mode. Or second and third releases most likely will not be mode. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the fun of this is kind of, it's coming up with that list, right? It's prioritizing and saying like, hey,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be great? And you start with that, and then you go out and obviously have to see what's possible. Sometimes get knocked back down to reality. But I think what's exciting is that it really feels like there's plenty of room in the space. You led this with you got into this in some of your opening comments, that there's so many great releases out there that have been treated with a reissue so many times. And what that leaves behind is a lot of stuff that is fantastic music that maybe hasn't been given the same level of attention, the same spotlight, but is so deserving of
Oh
that
yeah.
spotlight. And I think that, obviously look around this room and, the thousands of records. These are all possibilities in my head, right? Like obviously there's so much that you have to take off the table, but it's exciting when you consider how many possibilities
and,
are
and
out there.
and to your point, that's a lot of the fun. It's chasing those possibilities. Like, we have a huge list of things we want to do, and we start chasing this first one, and we realize, well, it's not going to happen because of a multitude of reasons, and then we go to the next one. And so it's part of the fun, and the people you meet in the journey, the contacts you make. It's all about the journey at the end of the day, right? This is for you and me. This is not a main job. It's not a daytime job, right? Uh, so it has to be fun as well. And I look forward to continue releasing. Again, our focus, and I want the label to continue focus on quality over quantity. We're not going to be releasing one record per month. We can't. We are very small endeavor. We don't have a lot of time, a lot of investments, actually no investments. So we need to go slow. But by going slow and by not having to rush, we're able to put together some very fine, exquisite products. And regarding your other question, when can we announce the second one? I think very soon. We are already mid production. It's an album that I really like as a collector. It's not very well known, not very popular, and that's part of our mission as well, right? It's to bring light to these records that people, you look at the record store and you might ask, should I buy it? Maybe if it's $1, I'll buy it. Otherwise, you just pass it, right? But it's a very, very good record with with amazing musicians that we're gonna be writing about in the booklet as well. So I'm excited about it, and I think very soon we can announce that. Maybe in the next couple of months, probably.
All right, so first of all, thanks very much, Philippe, for joining me and for talking about this release. I know that there's a lot of energy, and I've been teasing this release for gosh, like weeks on my YouTube channel, just because I couldn't resist. So I'm happy that we were finally able to get together, share some of this information, and for all of you folks out there. Again, this is the release. Like I said, it's available right now at gammaut.com, and I'll put the address here on the screen. And one of the things that I wanted to reference as well is that thus far we are actually selling, we'll call it direct from our website. However, we do have 4 vendor partners that we're working with at the moment. For those of you who want to come, visit a store and actually hold this thing and feel it before you buy, and it also kind of makes it a little bit easier for some of our European customers as well. So those 4 locations are Finer Sounds, located in Brooklyn, New York. We also have Hi-Fi Buys, located right here in my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia. We're also selling through Sam Records, who's based in Paris. I know many of you know Sam Records because they have their own label. And then finally, the Jazz Bureau, which is located in London. So hopefully, having some of these partners, especially located in Europe, will sort of make it a little bit easier, right, to access this. But otherwise, we are shipping internationally from our website. If you have any questions about that, you can obviously feel free to reach out to either of us, and certainly you can get in touch with us via the website. So thanks everyone, as always, for joining us for this discussion, and I'll see you next time.